Hi everyone, good evening or good day. My name is Rif Itzhaki. I'm the Director of External and Government Relations at the Mitvim Institute. And we are glad to host you today, our international friends all over the world and from different backgrounds, to this very important briefing on the Israeli initiative. And since we published the initiative in Hebrew a few weeks ago, we received so many questions from you, whether or when we are going to translate this very important initiative into English. So we did it a few days ago, and now we are glad to share it with you today. Within 24 hours of the October 7th massacre, we at the Institute recognized that in the face of this shocking and tragic terror attack, we cannot remain passive or silent. Radical voices advocating for revenge and the reoccupation of the Gaza Strip and were gaining prominence, and we knew that we had to formulate a hopeful alternative. So therefore, together with Berl Katznelson Center, with the support of the New Israel Fund, we established the Foreign and Security Team, which includes top-tier diplomatic and security experts with decades of experience. And this team, led by Dr. Omer Tzanani, formulated the Israeli initiative, which aims to turn the tragedy of the war into a political turning point between Israelis, Palestinians, and the entire Arab world. And in this briefing, Dr. Tzanani will explore the foundations of the initiative and outline its various stages. Then Bar Rappaport, our project manager of the Climate Diplomacy Program, will discuss the importance of creating a humanitarian strategy in Gaza. And finally, Professor Aryeh Katsovich, Chaim Weizmann Chair in International Relations at the Hebrew University, will present the hybrid role of an international peace conference in advancing immediate and long-term goals after the war. Of course, after the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session, so we recommend and of course encourage you to send your questions during the presentation in the Q&A box. My colleagues Roy Kibrik, Director of Research, and Phoebe Bruce will assist me with collecting the questions. So before we begin, I want to invite our CEO, Dr. Gil Mosiano, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Rif. Welcome, everybody. You know, as members of our community, whether you are diplomats or foreign correspondents or experts, I mean, you probably witnessed a number of different initiatives that we published during the years. And I will say, without cliches, this is one of the most important ones, at least in the last decade. And it's one of the most important ones, not just because of the timing and the current state of the war, but also because of the implications of the alternatives, of the paradigms and the direction that the state of Israel is going towards at the moment as we speak. Israel is at crossroad. I mean, one of the, I would say, the major conceptual victims of 7th of October is the perception that we can continue managing the conflict, anti-solutionism, not choosing or not promoting an initiative. We can sit idly by and the Israeli-Palestinian issue would solve itself. I think this is one of the things that we see today, the inability to speak about the day after, the inability to take the initiative. We see the signs and the damages already today when it comes to the inability to deal with an alternative to Hamas, starting from the issue of being able to create or to distribute humanitarian support today within Gaza, but also in relation to the basic, I would say, the relations between Israel and the US, its partners, the relations between Israel and its regional partners, the inability to provide a vision for the day after damages Israel today and basically puts it in a situation of strategic inferiority. So therefore, when we speak about the crossroad, there's the choice between two roads. The right wing or the extreme right wing, mainstream right wing, it's basically exposed its cards pretty clearly today with a plan that relates to resettlement of Gaza. Some would say encouraging involuntary or voluntary migration from Gaza on the one hand. And what you see today with the Israeli initiative is the alternative. The attempt to turn this tragic into a game changer, into a turning point, a political turning point in the relations between Israelis and Palestinians, and I would also say between Israel and the Arab world. This is an outcome of an operation, a task force led by Dr. Omer Zanani that basically featured some of the leading experts in Israel today without cliches. Some of the academic minds, some of the former diplomats and security experts. In the last couple of months, produced more than 8 policy papers. And what you see today is the outcome, the framework that connects the dots. I would say that if you followed the outcome of the publication a week ago in Hebrew, I would call it a positive disruption, basically, that we created with a special event in the Knesset. The plan was adopted by large parts of the left wing and the center in Israel. And we're seeing already the implications. We're seeing already feedback from the international system, whether it is about regional partners or international partners as a whole. Although we have a very detailed plan in front of us, I want to emphasize one major thing. This is just the starting point or the beginning. While the plan offers the ability to zoom in to specific policy ideas from multinational force in Gaza or revitalized PA, or as Professor Kachovich would present later on, an international peace conference, it is also a framework of a vision. It invites us to fill it with content, basically, together with regional and international partners and together with Palestinian partners. And that's basically the next phase. So I'll just finish with thanking both the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, specifically in regards to this international briefing, and the New Israel Fund for the major support, and to our partners at the Berl Katzenelson Foundation. Together with, basically, we created this joint task force, and the outcome that we see today and its crucial implications in front of you. So thank you very much, and I will pass the baton back to Rif.
Thank you, Gil. And now I would like to invite Judith Stelmach, project manager at Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Rif. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm honored to speak here in the name of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung here in Israel, but also in my function as project manager that is dealing with the issue of Israeli-Palestinian conflict for so many years, and working in close cooperation with both institutes who have formed this important new unit, the Mitvim Institute and the Berl Katzenelson Foundation. We feel at the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung that this initiative is the answer to the inability of Israel in the past years to move forward to a constructive solution for the conflict. We don't think that the paper, as Gil said, is the end of it. It is the beginning of a discussion, of a very, very productive and very, very intense process of thinking, of pondering, of discussing, of sometimes even arguing about the best way to get out of this deadlock that we have been in for so many years. And we hope that this presentation tonight will open further discussion also on the international level, and will be the opportunity for you to learn about the ideas that have been formulated up till now, and to be an active participant in this process of solving this very, very dear situation that we are in at the moment. Always with the sentence that we say in German, die Hoffnung stirbt zuletzt, the hope dies last. So I don't want the hope to die. I want it to be the basis for prosperity for everybody in this region. And I give the floor back to Rif. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. And I would like now to welcome Dr. Omer Zanani, head of the Foreign and Security Policy Team and director of the Israeli-Palestinian Peacemaking Program at Mitvim, to present the Israeli initiative. So, Omer, the stage is yours, and we can also change the slides.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. And this is the wrong slide, I think.
Yeah, we will, yes.
Okay, I'm very, very happy to be the one that dives in to the program. And as a former military guy, I will talk in three phases. The first phase will be very fast. I'll go to the assumptions of our initiative and the basic assumptions that led us to this specific idea that I will show to you. Next, I will talk about the rationale behind the plan, and then we'll talk about what we call the Roadmap 2.0 to the region, to security, long-term security in the region. Well, I'll start briefly and talk about the three assumptions. The first assumption is that October 7 didn't change the basic interest, the supreme interests of Israel that I will show you soon in the slide, which is first, okay, thank you, that's the one. Thank you. The next one, which is seeing Israel in our vision as the state of the Jewish people and as a democratic state. I'll just remind you those two elements. In order to fulfill them, we have to fulfill the vision of a separation between us and the Palestinians. But in order to put both, we have to have a secure state. And please, the next slide, Phoebe. In order to have a secure state, we have to talk about a deep security, a long-term security, and a long-term security meaning not only be strong and not only to have what we call a balance of capabilities, but also to minimize to close to zero as possible the rivals' motivations. And the formula and the model that we have for it, next slide, please, is the peace accord with Egypt. By the way, on Tuesday, 45 years, we fulfilled to this very stable peace accord. And the idea behind it is a balance between the idea of being strong and the idea of fulfilling the interests of both sides. And that's why it's a successful model. Just to remind you, Yom Kippur War ended. It was a big surprise for us. And by a gradual process, we gained the contract with Egypt, which led to lower the motivations. Not only the Egyptians are thinking that Israel is stronger than them, but because the motivation to go to war on both sides gets nearly to a zero. And that's what we should do with the Palestinian issue. Next slide, please. Now, Gil talked about the conflict management, so I'll do it very fast. From 67, we know of these three elements. First, we can't control the conflict. There is a phenomena of escalating spiral, which brought Hamas to what we saw on October 7, and we saw it much earlier before October 7. Second, we know it's a zero-sum game approach on both sides. And therefore, we can't minimize the conflict or shrinking the conflict as some of the center in Israel think that we should do. It's not feasible and it's a very shallow approach. But the third one, it gave the opportunity, as Gil mentioned, to the right wing, radical wing in Israel, especially in the last year, to make a reality, a one-state reality on the ground. And above it, next slide, please, what we saw in the last year is Netanyahu trying to take the temporary conflict management idea to an internal conflict, but basically make it a conflict on flames like we never saw before. He strengthened Hamas, he weakened the PA, he tried to go above the head of the Palestinians by the notion of peace to peace, peace for peace, above the head of the Palestinians. And the worst thing that he did, the coup d'etat and the annexation approach toward the West Bank, brought it as a silver plate to the Palestinians and to the explosion of October 7. So the main idea here is that we're not going back to the conflict management. And therefore, as was mentioned earlier, we have two alternatives. Next slide, please. One alternative is what's shown, and there is a big linkage between the paper that Netanyahu published, it's on the left of the slide, the day after the war, that Netanyahu thought he would show to the people that this is his own idea of the day after. The 3 words in the beginning of the paper is the IDF will continue the war. I'm translating it from the Hebrew version that you see in front of you, but it has a great linkage with the convention that was in Jerusalem that took place, and with Smotrich and Ben-Gvir's plans to bring about new settlements to the Gaza Strip. So it's not anymore conflict management. It's one alternative, which is very extreme alternative of an endless war and annexation. And on it, we think we bring a new paradigm. Please, next slide. And here I'm going to the initiative itself. First, I'm talking about the 3 innovations, mainly the 2 innovations. We can't wait for an agreement to come, sit and wait, and we see what happens on the ground, the one-state reality, and you know it all. We have to change things within the progress. And I'll talk about it later, about the idea of statehood, Palestinian statehood as the main issue in it. This is the first innovation, and it didn't occur, unfortunately, in the Oslo process. And the second one is the big opportunity that we see today in the region after the Abraham Accords and with the proposal of the Saudis for a big deal, for a grand deal with Israel. And today we see it as a very important issue, not only to fill up or to solve problems, pinpoint problems within the conflict, but also this will help us bring about a new Israeli, Palestinian, and regional agreement. I'll talk about it later. Next, please. Now, this is the rationale, the 4 anchors that we understand today: a political horizon from the beginning, Palestinian statehood, as I mentioned, freezing settlements and annexation, which we haven't done in the past also during the Oslo period, and what I call an alliance of the moderates, a coalition, regional coalition headed by the US, and I'll talk on each one of them. First, the political horizon. Now, as I always say, yeah, you're right, Phoebe, it's okay. Political horizon is not only an idea to change the atmosphere. It has security impact on the Palestinian people and on the Israeli side. And you can see it here. This is very important empiric polls, empiric data that we have, that I myself set with Khalil Shkaki. Everyone uses his polls that show us each month on Palestinian society trends. And we can see here what was the notion in the 90s, in the Oslo era, 80% support in the Palestinian Authority. It was even much higher in some of the years. And on the other side, we see a lower support in Hamas and in terrorism. At the highest, it was 13%. On the other side, we'd see what happens today. And it is an average, by the way. The West Bank and the Gaza Strip, you can see here more than 80% support in Hamas and terrorism. Now, you have to understand the idea. When Hamas builds on it, when Hamas knows that most of the Palestinian population wants to kill Israelis, so it's very good for him. There's a full plate for recruitment of suiciders, and we see it almost every day in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. And on the other hand, we see the lowering support in the Palestinian Authority. It's even dropped lower than 10%. Now, the idea is that the political horizon will change it, but it will be changed gradually. That's why what I will show you has to be gradual. Next, please. Now, the idea of Palestinian statehood is very, very important. And these 3 things that I'm showing you are, I think, an assumption that belongs not only to the left in Israel, but to the majority of Israel. The idea is that we have to have a partner, a Palestinian partner, that we will coordinate with him the security, the life-saving security. Second, we don't want to be responsible for 5 million Palestinians. Therefore, we have to build a stronger Palestinian force, effective force, that will be responsible and also moderate, of course. And we have to have a partner for stable Israeli, Palestinian, and regional settlements. For these three reasons, we have to go and to refill the idea that President Biden put on the table of a revitalized Palestinian Authority, which basically means a Palestinian state in the making. Next, please. About the alliance of the moderates, it's not only will help us to gain solutions for the terrible situation in Gaza that occur right now, but also to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'll talk about it later. It's very important also for dealing the dialogue and the negotiations on core issues. Second, we can have an effective coalition against Iran, against Hezbollah, against other issues within the region, because the threat is not only from the Palestinian and the Palestinian arena, but also from the region and mainly from Iran. And third, it will help us to prevent the takeover by China and Russia. We prefer the United States in the Middle East rather than the Russians and the Iran to control the Middle East. Next, please. Freezing the settlement. We know that the settlements, even though there is a debate in Israel, I think there can't be a debate that the settlements don't bring security to Israel because of the friction. And we see today that it's not only the security on the grounds, but also the delegitimization to Israel all over the world, and the IDF distraction. IDF has to prepare himself for war and not be the bad cop or the good cop in the territories. Next, please. And this is the roadmap. As you can see, there's 3 stages. I'll say briefly, very important, is that I personally would prefer 1 year from now that we have a final agreement with the region and to fulfill the Arab Initiative if it was realistic. But it's not. We have to have a gradual process under a strict and very agreed upon political horizon that will take us there. And on the road, we have to build things. So this is the idea. The stage 1, Aryeh will refer to it and will do it more elaborately. But the main idea is that in the beginning, both sides will issue declarations of commitment. And not only both sides, not only the Israelis and the Palestinians will agree about the Palestinian a demilitarized state living alongside in Israel, next to Israel, but also the United States, Saudi Arabia, and other elements which will be part of the process will have declarations from the beginning. And since then, immediately, we're getting inside the transitional period, which will take place 2 to 3 years. Again, unfortunately, but it will take time. And you can see in the inner phases, immediate steps, advancing demilitarized statehood, and preparing the ground for
I think we got some
different atmosphere and a different reality fit for a peace process. So it will include establishing international regional mechanism to enhance solutions on the ground, starting, of course, the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank, and building what I mentioned earlier, the revitalized Palestinian Authority. The next stage will mainly focus on advancing the demilitarized statehood. First, it's not only what the Palestinians and the Israelis will do, it will also include what today we're seeing the trend of recognizing a Palestinian state. We think, and that's why we put it here, it should be with an agreement with Israel, headed by the US, and the global recognition of a demilitarized Palestinian state, it's much better for the interest of Israel and the US to do it this way and not to enforce it on Israel in a situation where both sides or all sides are not getting anywhere towards this vision. There will be measures to strengthen the what I call state in the making. This includes also territorial issues that Israel will do on the ground. This will also lead the Palestinians to do a proven act against terrorism, de-radicalization, etc. By the way, de-radicalization will occur only under this atmosphere. It can't be done. Netanyahu wrote that there's need to be a de-radicalization. It can't be done where there's no atmosphere of peace and security for both sides. And as I mentioned, the regional approach, we will establish at this stage regional mega projects which will help both sides in terms of movement, in terms of industrial, in terms of many issues that will bring a change, a big change on the ground, but not only for Israel, also for the Palestinian. The main idea is to change the atmosphere of Oslo, where the Palestinian economy is totally dependent on Israel economy. The main idea here would be that the Palestinian economy will also be based mainly on the region, specifically on the Gulf countries. And at this stage, we will prepare the grounds for the arrangement, which will holding Palestinian elections under specific terms. Not only the atmosphere itself is enough, and here we're talking mainly about the three conditions made by the quartet, if you remember, from 2006, which means acknowledging Israel's right to exist and Israel's sovereignty, acknowledging past agreements, and most important, deserting the terrorism and violence against Israel. Now, this will lead to a situation that there's no place for Hamas or PIJ or other terror elements within the Palestinian leadership. And from there on, we can start holding preparatory dialogue, and the dialogue itself will take place on stage 3, and it will be different than in the past. It will be headed in 2 tables. One table, a bilateral, or maybe we can call it trilateral table, US, Israel, and the Palestinian. And alongside it, in parallel, there will be a regional table with Israel and the Palestinians. And again, it will assist us even in issues of the core issues. For example, I can mention 2 of them. In Olmert Abu Mazen talks, it was raised in 2008, if you remember the Annapolis process, for example, of how to give a good answer for the Jordan Valley as a threat to Israel. If Israel leaves the Jordan Valley, we can have here a regional approach with the Jordanians. We can't do it alone. We have to put inside the Jordanians and to put forces, maybe international forces from the eastern side of the valley. And another main important issue that was raised there, and I think we should get on with it, also the idea of regional approach towards Jerusalem solution headed by 5 countries, including Saudi Arabia and other elements, and not trying to division Jerusalem historic basin into places that owned by Israel and by the Palestinians. So these are only 2 examples, but there are many more examples for it, and this will help us to bring about a solution. And maybe the bonanza, the main point here is that it will not lead only to a 2-state solution, a stable 2-state solution, but it will also assist us with normalizing, real normalization with Israel, between Israel and the Arab world. Now, alongside, you can see down the slide, the US, Israel, and the Arab countries, some of the Arab countries, we will establish a US-led regional defense coalition that will deal with the spoilers, with Iran, and with other elements, very important elements, also including the climate crisis. But this shows you that it's not only talking about the Palestinian issue and not even only talking about going to normalization and ending the Arab-Israeli conflict, but also dealing with other threats like Iran and the regional terrorism. Next slide, please. And lastly, there are many challenges. We're well aware of it. We know that this government won't lead this kind of a program. That's why we have to have a new leadership for Israel. By the way, new leadership that will not only have to have new and fatal and very important decisions for Israel looking ahead, but also will lead to a unity in Israel, which Netanyahu and his government deliberately make this unity inside Israel. This is about the leadership in Israel. I talked about the legitimate Palestinian leadership. I talked about the regional spoilers. I think I don't have much time more to discuss. And what's the last one? No? The building trust. Of course, we have to deal also with the forces, radical forces inside Israel, and that's the meaning of building internal trust. So that's it for now. I'm ready for questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Omer. We can go back to the main presentation, Phoebe. So I think one of the most innovative aspects for me, like it was in this initiative, is that it proposes like taking immediate on-the-ground action to create a two-state reality. And this proactive approach aims to establish a stable environment that will eventually gain broad support even before a formal agreement is signed between Israelis and Palestinians. So now I would like to invite Bar Rapaport, project manager of the Climate Diplomacy Program, to elaborate on the importance of creating a humanitarian strategy in Gaza. Bar, along with her project's researchers, is spearheading the development of a post-conflict humanitarian strategy. This strategy has the potential to lay the groundwork for a political path between Israel and Palestinians. So please, Bar, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Sharif, and thank you, Omer, for your presentation. Can you hear me well? Okay, so I'll start. Gaza, as you all know, is facing a humanitarian catastrophe, and the situation on the ground is very, very complicated. There's lots of discussions over famine, shortage in water. It's getting very hot, so the water issue becomes super critical those days. We know that the donations are not necessarily accurate to the needs of the populations. We know that in the crossings, the way they preference the aid is not always accurate. There's lots of arguments between Israel to other states and the UN organizations about what data is correct. Everyone is working within Gaza separately, most of the time with no shared planning. And the professional staffs in Israel are trying to do their best, but within the limitations of the Israeli policy. And there are limitations, as you all know. There's lots of questions about how aid is entered. In that aspect, that's something that Israel completely controls in. And I think there's much more to do for sure. Opening the Erez crossing, more crossing in the north, the Ashdod port. But we also know that there are more challenges, not only what is entering, but also who is dividing, how is it reaching to the population. and there's lots of discourse also about the fact that the armed forces, especially in the north, are taking over aid trucks and sell food in very high prices that the population cannot face. Hamas is doing a cynical use in the hunger of the population, and one of the most complicated issue in that aspect is that Israel has no policy for the day after, and when there's no policy for the day after, so we have Somalia. That's what we see in the north of Gaza, in some places in the south also. Each one is taking care of himself. There is a chaos when the army clears the area from the population and he leaves. And in our experience, there's a lot of hard work to take out terrorists from certain areas, and then when there's no one else that enter in to give to do the civil management, to give the civil services, and there's a vacuum. So to this vacuum, we see the armed forces entering. So, and I would also say that there's lots of complexities within Israel, and lots of arguments about this. Should Israel support humanitarian aid or not? We're always going back to this moral discussion, because there's hostage, and because of the 7th of October, and it also makes it very hard for Israel to publish what it is doing for to give further humanitarian aid, but it also makes it very hard to do more, okay, because of public opinion. If it's possible to pass one slide. Thank you. So we have some basic understanding that we believe that they're important in order to start thinking of humanitarian strategy. The first understanding is that Israel should and can do more to stabilize the situation in Gaza. It cannot do it by herself, and we will talk about it soon. Again, because there's no planning for the day after, because there's no understanding of what will happen in Gaza after the war ends. So we are stuck with the question of what will be the mechanism, who will give the services, who will, not only aid organizations can give food to the people, but the question is who rules the territory, and then decides who gets what. And that's a very critical aspect. And when we talk about this crisis, so experts talk about at least 10 years of Gaza need to get external aid. So we're talking about a huge crisis that will continue for the coming years, and we need to start realize that in order to start plan and look for the future in this context. If it's possible to move another slide. Another important assumption is that as the humanitarian situation is getting worse, so we lose legitimacy in the war, in the world. So as our legitimacy to fight Hamas, it depends in the fact that the civil population can have a stable humanitarian situation, if not better. So and it damages Israel image very much, and our moral identity. And again, that it returns to the inner discourse within Israel. And we know that when we talk about humanitarian aid, we must talk about public health. We must talk about the spillover effect it has to Israel. We must talk about the critical infrastructures of water and sewage and energy, because it's all related. And if we know to plan it well and to use this sense of urgency, because there is a sense of urgency, and to use all the players that are there, putting their boots on the ground, if we know how to use those things properly, we can prepare the field to a political solution that goes to the direction of the two states solution. And another important assumption is that eventually, if we want a real humanitarian relief for the Palestinians in Gaza, we need to have a mechanism, a management mechanism that is accepted both by Israelis and Palestinians. There's no secrets in here. It's most probably the Palestinian Authority. Part of the complexities is that today, not Israel and not the Palestinians themselves wants to do it. And okay, so we'll move on. So we were trying to think, what should humanitarian strategy include? How do we look at this crisis, very, very big crisis, and start to plan and work not only in the immediate steps of what we should do tomorrow morning, and there's much to do tomorrow morning, but also to look further, to ask ourselves how we lead the steps that we're doing now to bring us to a better starting point to go to the roadmap. And when we're thinking about humanitarian strategy, okay, that Israel should adopt, but not alone, because Israel cannot do it alone. We need our regional partners, our international partners, the aid organizations, but we know that we need here a joint international mechanism where Israel's role is defined within this mechanism and its responsibilities. I believe that not the IDF should be the one that's leading this mechanism, but the government. We need, again, to define exactly what Israel should do and what are the red lines that once they're crossing, if there's a crisis of lack of water and food, Israel should step and take further action. We need to look at stages in transition from emergency to the beginning of rehabilitation, to independence, to reconstruction. And this mechanism should also, we need to choose within the strategy the actors that are involved, out of the understanding that those actors will be part of the day after in Gaza. And I will also say that when we look at this strategy, it's one step, very small step within this context of trust building between the two sides. And another aspect is that, and that will be the last thing I'm gonna say, is that we know that, again, we should start and plan ahead, not only how what we need to do immediately to bring relief in the aspects of health and water and food, but also how we plan it to be sustainable, and how we plan it for the future, and how we connect between those immediate steps to what is required in the future. So I'll stop here. I'll just say we have some written documents dealing with those subjects that we'd love to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Bar. It seems to me that the world won't wait for Israel to promote a policy for the day after, especially a humanitarian strategy. We're not going anywhere here, and actions need to be taken. Otherwise, this reactive mindset would only damage Israel's interests. So next up, I would like to invite Professor Aryeh Katsovich, Chaim Weizmann Chair in International Relations and full Professor of International Relations at the Hebrew University. Aryeh will discuss the hybrid role of an international peace conference in advancing immediate and long-term goals after the war. the concept of an international peace conference is crucial for the implementation of the initiative. It is the first and most fundamental stage of the Israeli initiative, and his presentation is actually based on a paper that he wrote as part of the Foreign and Security Team research, and I will link it here. So please, Aryeh, 10 minutes, and then we go to Q&A.
Okay, good evening from Jerusalem, and let me start by thanking all of you, Mitvim, Omer, Gil, and really thank you for enrolling me. I mean, I'm a peace scholar for 31 years. I have never been a practitioner. So for me, it's an experience, and it's out of, you might say, desperation after October 7th to try to do something, as Gil was referring, since we are really at the crossroads. So that led me to study about International Peace Conference and then try to write something that, in a sense, echoes and rhymes with the first stage of this roadmap. Since we are talking about roadmap 20 years later after the initial roadmap. And this is an intellectual exercise, you might say, in political fiction, but it might happen since when I study this, I try to learn from a previous experience. And as you are going to see when we move into the next slide regarding the different recommendations, I learned especially from the Madrid conference in 1991 as a model for what might happen after the war. And the advantage of that, if there is a ceasefire, and we have the 2824 a couple of days ago, the Security Council, I don't know where it's going to take place, but it does not have to wait until a formal ceasefire, and we have to discuss the day after now. And there is some urgency. So this International Peace Conference cannot take place in 6 months from now. So it should take place in April, or it should take place in May. And as in a sense, bringing everything together from the start, the idea is to bridge the gap between the immediate concern, which is ending the war and dealing with the situation in the Gaza Strip, as Bar was referring, and later on, down the road, the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We are already into a low-intensity warfare in the Gaza Strip. We don't know whether an hostage deal will take place. That should be the most important paramount issue. We don't know when the IDF would withdraw. And in a sense, for this conference, Israel and the PA should be invited, and you don't have to wait for elections, neither in the Israeli case, neither in the Palestinian case. And learning from experience, International Peace Conference can play a tool to help international and domestic legitimacy. I would be a bit a less bombastic riff in the sense that this is not the major piece in the puzzle. It's a brick in the wall, and the way I like to think about this, it might be a necessary but not a sufficient condition, and it's just one part of the plan. Phoebe, if we can move on. Thank you. So think about this as a diplomatic tool for peacemaking and peace building, and this type of conference that we are envisioning, it's mostly symbolic. I mean, it's not a conference where you are going to have negotiations on. And by the way, in the history of the Arab-Israel conflict, we had conferences like that, Lausanne 49, and after the Yom Kippur War. When this is supposed to take place, next month, in 2 months from now, where you can think about some interesting usual suspects. Rhodes in Greece echoes the 49 very successful armistice agreements. Riyadh might be attractive. Amman, Cairo, those are the 2 Arab countries that they are mostly interested. Who should be there? Well, it's not completely clear. In my view, everybody should be there. The P5, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, which are the quartet members. There is a problem with Russia, and we have that in the document. There might be a problem with China, although China is the emerging global power. We have the regional quartet, as it was mentioned by Omer. The regional quartet, Egypt, Jordan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia should play a very important role, the Arab League. So this is basically what you had in Annapolis in November for one day. Now, how this is a type of conference that it's not dealing with global peace, that's a different webinar. It's not dealing with actual negotiations, but it's setting the stage. There is a symbolic importance to set the stage and to set the agenda for further negotiations at the bilateral and multilateral level. It might empower either a UN authority or something else that should take care of the Gaza Strip instead of the IDF. Phoebe, can we move next? Now, regarding the substance, the mandate of the International Peace Conference, well, the mandate, you can have a direct mandate referring to the issues that Bar was talking about because there is an urgency there. So in a sense, the logic is to refer to the immediate future of the Gaza Strip, relaunch a political roadmap that would fulfill the idea of 181. We are reinventing the wheel. There is nothing new under the sun, which is basically the idea of 2 states for 2 peoples, refreshing the Arab Peace Initiative, and including all the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions from 242 all the way to the one from a few days ago, 2728. The agenda should include also all the topics, because as Omer referred, and it's in the document, you have to clearly have a vision where this is leading. So there should be a conditional recognition of the military state of Palestine, the creation of an authority in Gaza, the launching of a massive Marshall Plan to Gaza and the West Bank, where you were referring that you might need at least 10 years to reconstruct the Gaza Strip, and peace negotiations leading to 2-state and peace between Israel and Arab countries. The expected results would be to put in motion 2 tracks of negotiations, as Omer was referring. And finally, Phoebe, so I would stick to my time, which academics usually we don't do. Now, you might say they are very problematic issues. I mean, the current Israeli government might not want to come, but that was the case with Itzhak Shamir, Lolo Shamir, as we say in Hebrew, that he reluctantly came to Madrid because he didn't have an alternative. And think about an international peace conference and setting a kind of package deal, setting a priori the political horizon and bringing the significant members of the international community. So in a sense, it creates the agenda, and it might provide the legitimacy for actors that might need that. We know that Israel does not like the idea. Even a better government would not like the idea because Israel always prefers bilateral negotiations. But in a sense, the logic here, and you can use the term hybrid or integrate, is to bring the immediate issues of humanitarian and logistical assistance with the long-term issues that have to do with the negotiations toward a 2-state solution and a peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. You know, since October 7, I'm telling my students and everybody that in international relations, there is no Mother Teresa. It's only interest. Nobody is going to help in reconstructing the Gaza Strip without having a political horizon. And probably one explicit way of putting this on the table would be through an international peace conference. I think I stick to my 10 minutes. Thank you very much. And I guess we're open now for Q&As. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Aryeh. I believe that an international peace conference would emphasize to Israelis and Palestinians alike that their conflict is not merely a domestic issue, but rather a global concern that requires our serious attention. So with that note, I would like to go ahead to the Q&A session. First of all, thank you all for presenting. And you can also scan here the different QR for reading more about the Israeli initiative and, of course, our social media channels. And I would like to start with a question of Muriel Asberg from SVP. How do we get from today's world with the right-wing majority in Israel and an uptick in support for armed struggle among Palestinians to the new war. Where does the new leadership on both sides, willing and capable to engage in such a way, come from? So maybe I would like to address this question to Arya.
Aha.
Maybe I will try, Reef.
Yes, go ahead, both of you.
Thank you, and then Arya.
Yes.
Thank you, Muriel. Nice to hear from you. This is a very good question, I think, and it's so basis, and I think I'm realistic in my approach, and I'm looking at what happened at 73. I think it's the lack of choice, and that's what I tried to do when I spoke about the assumptions that brought this plan to the table. You know, William Zartman, I hear from Arya, he talked about the ripeness from both sides to gain into a settlement as a notion, as an important idea that bring two sides when they have no other choice. So this is the first answer that I can give you, that we have no other choice but to collapse ourselves, because the program of Netanyahu and Smotrich will collapse Israel. But the other answer is to take again the model of what happened after the Yom Kippur War. Nobody believed, after the big surprise and the hatred of both sides to one another, nobody believed that 4 years after that, President Sadat will come to the Knesset and give his speech. And then in a gradual, by the way, the same, in a gradual process, we will gain a peace accord between Israel and Egypt. So these are my two answers. Arya, you want to refer to it too?
Well, I also had in mind this idea of ripeness, which is a mutually hurting stalemate.
Yeah.
Because there is not going to be a so-called total victory, you know. That's an empty slogan taken from Nazi Germany. I'm sorry. So the only possible victory would be, you know, many of us, we are carrying this, would be a hostage deal and later on a political process. But I'm aware that the difficult part would be to convince, not in English, but in Hebrew. And that's why I guess, Omer, the idea of framing this in terms of security, and you put that in the document, that we have to convince the Israeli citizens that the only way to bring security is through peace agreements. And just imagine as a counterfact where we would be at this moment without peace with Egypt, without peace with Jordan, that was a direct outcome of the Oslo process, and even without the agreements with the Palestinian Authority that we tend to bash. But it's not going to be easy, and that's why we need also the help from the international community, because to launch an international peace conference, you know, you go back to James Baker drawing the Madrid principles, they don't have to get the okay from Netanyahu. You know, Netanyahu threatening the US, it's like Peter Sellers in the Mouse That Roar, if you know that movie from '59. You don't need to wait for that. So you can put in motion processes. And then, you know, you mentioned that, Omer, the public opinion is malleable. It can change. If we have a poll after the Yom Kippur War, everybody would call Sadat a Nazi. And 4 years later on, he was in Jerusalem.
If I can add to it, Reef, if I may, one of the questions here is also about leadership. We are in transformative times regarding the leadership of both sides. You know, the cliche of the day after Abu Mazen in Israel, understanding the pains and suffering that the full-fledged right-wing government brought with it. And when we do surveys, and it's quite an odd situation to do surveys during a war, you know, like building bridges in an earthquake, what you see among the Israeli public, at least, is a state of schizophrenia, maybe. 52% support some kind of a solution of sovereignty that would allow sovereignty to the Palestinians, but less than 20% believe that the PA should continue existing. The Israelis are in a fog. It's exactly what Arya is describing. If we will have this survey at the end of October 73, the Israelis will be for starvation of the Third Army. And then 4 years later, you have a completely, they are looking to be led. This is one of the major discussions that we have with the political leadership in Israel from the center and the left for new ideas. So this is part of it. And we are talking about one of the major concepts, we always speak about a war of no choice. What we are speaking about right now, and I think Aryeh and Omer are talking about, is a piece of no choice that we basically do not really have. I mean, the alternative is the abyss, basically. And I think there's a growing understanding in the Israeli public about this implication. Regarding the Palestinians, and this is really a nutshell of a nutshell because we want to take more questions. I think that what Omer emphasized, and maybe this is the difference between our plan and the classic Biden plan, is the gradual process, is the ability to be top down, bottom up, to show gradually through steps that affects also the quality of life, but also create a two-state reality, the real tangible value and change of life when it comes to sovereignty, when it comes to a political horizon in the next couple of years. So it's not just, we tend to think about peace agreement as historical handshakes at the White House. No, we are talking about evolving peace, something that has value on the immediate level and gradually developing. Combination of both, in many ways, our $72,000 answer to Muriel's $1 million question in a way.
All right, we will continue. I see two questions of Dr. Alexander Loengarov. Sorry if I don't pronounce it right. But I will start with the second question. Given the profound trauma both Israeli and Palestinian society have gone through, do you think a few years are sufficient to make any implemented agreement sustainable? Omer, I think this question is for you.
Yeah, that's a very important question, and this is something that we had a big dilemma about. Now, we have to balance between the idea of graduality and between the idea of being realistic and still to give hope to both peoples. Now, we came with the 5 years formula, but I think we didn't do it just by dropping numbers. I think it is there where we can think of a real change that can occur on the grounds and on the minds of the people of both sides. By the way, you remember in Oslo Accord, after 5 years, we were supposed to go to a final agreement. So maybe it has connection to there. Maybe it's a problem with our minds. But people in Israel, politicians are talking about tens of years and 15 years and 20 years. You can't give hope to both peoples when you're saying it will be an endless process. On the other hand, it can't be tomorrow. So this is the balance that we found from both within this tension. Thank you.
I may just add a sentence there. I think Israelis, we have a wrong conception of peace. I mean, Israelis are very binary. It's either Arabs, and we have, unfortunately, the tragedy, the massacre of October 7. Palestinians want to throw us into the sea, or if peace, it has to be, as we say, putzi mutzi, love and harmony and the yellow submarine. And that's not the case. So reconciliation can wait. But you cannot wait decades, because decades you are already having a one-state reality. So, and you have to do that now, and it's not that you have to ask the population. I mean, I'm sorry, right? It's not going to be built from grassroots, bottom up. That's why you don't have decades here. You have to do that in a period of time, and I think what Yossi Beilin complains, the problem with Oslo, the autonomy is still going on after 30 years, is that they did not, they didn't define the end goal. And this is exactly what you have in the Israel initiative. You start from the end, you know where it's going. And in the Oslo documents, you will never find explicitly the term Palestinian state.
All right, so I have a question to Bar. So Bar mentioned that Israel not providing humanitarian aid damages Israel's international legitimacy. Would providing humanitarian framework actually repair this, or is the damage too far done?
You're asking me? I think we should ask the other people that are sitting here. I think we need to believe that our image can be changed. I think it's one of the biggest motivations today for Israel to act in the humanitarian aspect. And if we can't bring this, those justifications to why we should properly support humanitarian aid and do the maximum effort, so external push wouldn't be harm. And but again, I would say that that Israel cannot do it alone. There's lots of challenges, especially within Gaza in the division aspects, that the support of the actors again that are in, that opened field hospitals, that gives food, the working together with those organizations, with the states, is a very critical support to Israel, backup to Israel, to do the things that are required in her side, like in order that Israel will do the maximum. And again, there's lots of other inner complexity, but it will be very helpful if there will be an organization mechanism and cooperation with all the actors that have a connection with what's happened in Gaza. And I think the presence of the Palestinian Authority within this process, as it is today, before it's going to revitalization, as it is today, is critical for those steps and meaningful changes.
If I can add, Rif, I think, and just building on what Barak just said, if it stops with the humanitarian aid, the effect is limited. We've seen it before. And there's a major issue here about the mechanism of moving to rehabilitation or even reconstruction to the real political level. This is maybe what connects Bar's plan with Omer's plan and with the Arya's plan. But the issue here, and if we can speak, and it's very hard to speak about an opportunity within a humanitarian crisis, but there's something about the sense of urgency. You know, there's something about the fact that already on the ground today, without major political commitments, you see everybody involved in this issue of humanitarian aid. The Americans with the harbor, the UAE with the water purification systems. You see the Jordanians, if you want the metaphor, everybody's trying to parachute equipment separately. You know, each one is trying to save the day. But the ability to take the humanitarian issue, just as we did with climate change in other places, a place where there's a clear understanding of the sense of urgency, and to use it as a practical platform to bring a regional Israeli action that would later on can develop and spill over beyond the humanitarian aid, into the political level, into reconstruction, into part of what Omer was describing here. One of the most impressive things that I find in your work, Bar, is that you're not trying to go back to the status quo before the war. What you said is very interesting because you are trying to develop something anew. It's not about going back to the status quo or creating the threshold of humanitarian support, of energy, of public health. It's actually trying to create something that is much better and reach out to 10 and 15 years, and it's actually political, not just humanitarian in its basis.
And I can also add that the international community has various tools to give incentives to Israel. Once Israel will open, I hope very soon, the Erez crossing. So what incentive, even in the sense of public not opinion, but how is it presented in the press? That's also can be incentive. Look, here Israel is taking further steps. Now I know nothing is enough in this situation, but those minor incentives can support those steps that Israel is will do.
All right, I will move to the next question here. Very exciting that you've studied so many facts of the conflict, but of course there is the issue of the elephant in the room, Hamas. They are not mentioned in any way who takes responsibility and changes the paradigm of Hamas stranglehold on Gaza and its citizens? Secondly, this is one question. The second question is, can you explain how you arrived at the solution for Jerusalem? I mean, yes. I mean, it doesn't. We didn't mention that, or Omer, is there like?
No, I mentioned it and I refer
Yes.
to it. But first, the first question is very important. By the way, we had a dilemma. I remember Gil and I spoke about, do we enter into the Israeli initiative also the what we call the exit strategy, or what should be the exit strategy? And I'll refer to it. I'll tell you, I think there is a very good, can be an exit strategy from the war, which includes in it the big question that you gave here, who is the alternative? Who will be the alternative for Hamas rule? But you have to understand, Netanyahu is against exiting the war. That's why it doesn't occur. But in a different and rational government in other days, we would have basically 5 steps. And I'm saying it as a strategist, you know, from kindergarten, you can think about it. It's all there. Put a time frame for a month or 2 from now. Within this time frame, you tell the IDF to draw the lines where they are staying for a small period of time, for a half a year, maybe at most for a year. At this stage, you bring about a grand deal with Hamas for the abductees, and then you put inside a figure, which, by the way, the Israeli security apparatus recommended a figure like this. For example, Majd Faraj or other very reliable figure that will take over not only the civilian issues and the humanitarian issues, but also begin to talk about security issues of how to deal with Hamas in this inner period. It's before we're going inside the roadmap, okay? And alongside it, you start to press for a new revitalized Palestinian Authority that will come inside, for example, for a year from now. Now, all these 5 elements, of course, has to be under the biggest element and the biggest elephant in the room. You have to put a political horizon, or at least an agreement to the vision of the 2-state solution. So that's why it's 5 elements and not 4. Now, by the way, it's very important not only to solve the Gazan and the West Bank issue, it's also important to gain on with the solution to the north, because we understand that we have to bring solution, not only a security solution for what's going on northern to the border, political and military situation within Hezbollah, but we have to bring back almost 100,000 or 60 or 70,000 people that went southern to northern Israel. So all of this is an example of an exit strategy that this government don't want any of the elements that I've mentioned, and this will bring us to the part where we can do the summit that Aryeh discussed, and we can draw the roadmap. So this is for the first question, and remind me, what's the second one?
The
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem one, if you want, I can also
Yeah,
relate to it,
there
to
are 2
Jerusalem.
approaches. Now, this is not for now, but when we'll get to the stage of the negotiations, there were 2 approaches. If you remember, Camp David and Taba talks and Clinton offer about the sacred Hagan HaKadosh, no?
The Holy Basin.
The Holy
Mhm.
Basin, yeah, thank you. The idea of Barak that he puts on the last stages of Camp David and especially later on was a division. You remember the horizontal division and the other division of the Holy Basin. I think it's a bad idea because it can't be done. It's an attempt to, you know, to divide the cards between both peoples, to say you're sovereign here and you're sovereign here. Olmert did, I think, a smarter thing, but it has to be done in a regional approach towards Jerusalem. He talked about an approach of sovereignty to the God, to Allah, to Elohim. and not to the people. And the Holy Basin will stay under 5 countries under Mishtar Ne'emanut.
Trusteeship regime.
Trusteeship, that's right. Thank you, Arya. Trusteeship regime headed by countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, of course, which is involved today in the Holy Basin, the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian State, Israel, and maybe even Morocco. And this idea, I think it's more plausible, but again, it serves us only when we take a regional approach toward the conflict and toward solving the conflict specifically on Jerusalem. By the way, there are solutions like this on the refugee issue and on security issues, as I mentioned, and I think there are more. That's why the regional approach towards the dialogue is very, very important, because both sides alone can do real progress. Thank you.
But there's something I think that about Jerusalem that is more than Jerusalem, about our sensible solution on this issue. Because when we discuss this idea of evolving peace, the idea that you take practical steps, but ones that are not just limited to improving the immediate issue, they create a different political reality. I think that Jerusalem, this idea of a joint mechanism to run the Holy Basin is exactly it. You know, Israelis, before the war, remembered the Palestinians from one Ramadan to another. It was always about security in the Holy Basin and preventing escalation. What we are offering here is an idea, a joint mechanism by Israelis, Palestinians, and regional actors that, yes, would solve the security problem or the coordination issues there. But more importantly, in the long run, would do 2 things. First of all, it would allow the Palestinians some kind of a saying on one of the core issues of negotiation, which is Jerusalem. And second of all, it would incorporate regional actors in the overall framework of the Israeli-Palestinian solution, as part of what Omer described as an Israeli-Palestinian regional solution. So it's about the immediate issue, but also about the long-term effect. And I would put it really within those series of practical steps that change or create a 2-state reality.
All right, so if I can summarize the question of David Jed Schwartz, he's mentioning about the inequality or the lack of equal treatment to Palestinians in a 2-state solution. And this is a question that we received a lot about a federation, a mutual federation, and what we think about it, and like in general your thoughts about mutual federations of Palestinians and Israelis. Yes, Arya, I see you. Yeah.
There is a confusion between federation. I mean, a federation would be what I call Israelstein. I mean, a one state for everybody, which I think after October 7, if there are people that they think that Israelis and Palestinians can live under the same political roof, I think they are dreaming more than we are dreaming in the Israeli initiative. Having said that, and it's not in the plan that Omer wrote about, but last year, before the war, I became more and more interested in their initiatives that they talk about a 2-state solution enhanced. In other words, after you have a 2-state solution, you can move into a kind of confederation, which is a frame after the European model. And that's something different. It's not a federation. I don't think a federation is feasible. Now, I agree with David in his question that there has been always a problem in the relations, negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, that Israelis would tend to patronize them. You know, Ehud Barak knew exactly what the Palestinians needed. And he offered, people don't know, he offered about 90 plus 1% of the West Bank. He didn't offer the best possible deal. So that's a problem. And that's why the logic of a confederation is supposed to bring about a more equal treatment. But the condition for that should be first to have a 2-state solution.
All right, I have a couple of questions here by Angela Godfrey. So I will address, I think there are 2 very interesting questions to Bar here. So first of all, the first question is toxicity of soil equal cancer in children, now a major problem. Major rehabilitation will be required, I guess. And I think that the next question is like relating to the original plan of the government. Maybe Somalia is the plan. I think she mentioned like the government, they want a forever war to ethnically cleanse land. No.
I need you to help me understand the
Yes,
question
so
better.
I would start with the second question, which like is referring to the government. Maybe the original plan of our government, Netanyahu's government, is like having a new Somalia. They want a forever war and to ethnically cleanse land.
Yeah, well, I can answer that. I believe that whoever wrote it read the article in 2017 of Smotrich. It's called The Decision Plan of Smotrich, 2017. It wasn't written after 7th of October, and it's all written there. An endless war. He called it two decisions that Israel has to make, and two decisions on the ground. One is settlements decision, which means a civilian decision to sit all around to bring more. Today it's 500,000. It should be 2 million in the West Bank, and of course in the Gaza Strip after 7th of October, but mainly a military decision. Military decision means to what he said, what he referred to, despair instead of hope. This is the rationale of Smotrich, which is exactly what you're saying. The idea is to make them miserable lives, that they either would accept everything and would leave their idea of an independent state, or they will leave with our help, of course. So this is basically the idea, and that's why it's so important to understand that the continuation of the war, and this government is talking about the main goal. The main goal is the continuation of the war, and we should put something as an alternative to it, because it will ruin not only the Palestinians, it will ruin us as well.
So maybe I'll also try and respond. Thank you, Omer. I'll say first that Israel is acting in like her central mean is status quo. We won't decide. Whatever will happen, will happen. Let's see what will happen. Now, within Israel, as Omer said, within the Israeli government, there's a very right wings people that are sitting there, and they're pushing to their directions by doing actions on the ground. One of the actions here is not to decide who will govern the territory, because I guess they understand the consequences of this thing. But there are also more forces within the government and within the professional staffs in Israel that are trying to give creative solutions to how to solve this, how to create unique mechanisms that will allow the civil populations to get their services without the army will give it, without the Palestinian Authority. I mean, Israel, there's many people in Israel, I think even the president itself, that understand the effects, the crucial effects of those aspects of Israel in a sense of public health, for sure. You are talking about the oil and the cancer, but there's much more diseases. I have a list of them that are widely spread in Gaza and soon to be here. Sewage is soon to be here. Like we're in the same, we live in the same ecological system. And one of the things that we're trying to echo to the Israeli policymakers is that stability in Israel, in Gaza, and a good humanitarian situation in Gaza is crucial for the Israeli interest. And I think many people understand that, and they try to do a mix over and to like invent very creative solutions within the very problematic policy of the Israeli government.
All right. I think I have a very good question here by Gabriela Boliger. Does your plan allow for any kind of ongoing military campaign against Hamas if it is still a viable force, or if it regroups after an eventual ceasefire? can there be a peace process on the one hand, and on the other one, ongoing IDF action against the terrorist groups on, yeah. So basically the question is about Hamas and can we continue with this plan?
Well, actually, it's not about Hamas. It's about the policy, military policy of Israel against Hamas. And it's a very, very good question. And this is a big dilemma amongst people from the center in Israel, amongst ex-generals, how we can, square the round. Basically, we have to understand there is no limit to destroy all Hamas capabilities. It's a bottomless barrel. Because what is the terrorism of Hamas? The terrorism of Hamas is not built solely on the Nukhba and the brigades that are in Gaza and that were doing a great job in killing them. But it includes people, and we see it in the West Bank very well. It includes Palestinian people who have no other option but to go to this route. And from despair, and I'm not saying it's legitimate, but we have to understand that there has to be another concept. And on a certain point, we have to understand there's a change of course from the military course to the political course. Now, for the question itself, as I said in the exit strategy, we have to put the line where we are stopping the military campaign. It can be months from now, it can be a year from now, but we have to put a line and say, here we stop, we have an alternative, a security apparatus of the Palestinians headed by the Palestinian Authority, which is good enough that will also coordinate his approach with us. And this is the point of change. I'm not saying let's leave Gaza tomorrow and not deal militarily with Hamas, but we have to put the line, again, month or 2 months from now, and at most, for the plan to start, we have to put the line where we stop the military campaign and we change the course towards eliminating Hamas by a political vision and not only by a military power, because it doesn't work only with military power, as I said before.
If I add a footnote, I want to quote one of the major experts on Palestinian politics. I mean, we can quote also Jonathan Zoref, who mentioned that, but Mati Steinberg likes to say, and I think this is a very important quote for what we are talking, that the major enemy for Hamas is a political process. When you look at that, and in a sense, it summarizes many of the things we are talking here. You have fundamentalists on both parties that they want the entire land, whether it's Eretz Israel or Palestine, and you have the pragmatic ones that they want to return to the idea of the partition. So, and keep in mind that they are the same people that relay, sabotage, torpedo, as it's written in the document, the peace process in the 90s. Hamas on the one hand, and our fundamentalists, Jewish fundamentalists from Baruch Goldstein to Yigal Amir, who killed the Prime Minister Rabin. So the major enemy of Hamas is a political process. And that's the problem, that we have to convince our Israeli peers that they think in tactical terms and not in strategic terms, that Hamas is also an ideology. So you can keep killing their brigades, but they are turning to guerrilla because they have the idea. And the way to kill the idea is to offer the Palestinians and us a better political alternative.
Yes, and if I may just add that one mechanism that we suggest, one alternative to be assisted by, is the multinational forces. This is an alternative invited by the Palestinian Authority, by the Palestinian moderates, as a mechanism who would assist them to handle more effectively with not just with security, but also with statehood and with other civilian and humanitarian and reconstruction in Gaza and so forth. So this is another mechanism we explored and suggested, and we have a paper on that as well.
Thank you, Rory. And unfortunately, we have to close our briefing. So I would like to thank again our speakers, Dr. Omer Tzanani, Bar Rappaport, and Professor Aryeh Katsovich for their very interesting presentations and insights. I would like also to thank our partners, the Berl Katznelson Center and the New Israel Fund for establishing the Foreign and Security Team and, of course, promoting the Israel Initiative. And of course, I would like to thank Friedrich Ebert Stiftung for supporting and promoting today's briefing. Thank you very much for all of you. So finally, Israel has a hopeful alternative to propose to the international community. And it comes from the growing liberal camp, and we didn't speak so much about it. So I think we should next time. We believe our initiative is a gradual and pragmatic roadmap for ensuring long-term peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike, and has the potential to bring Israel much closer to the Arab world. So I would like to thank you all for dedicating your time to this briefing, and we would be glad to hear from you insights, comments, and remarks on our initiative, and to continue to work with you. Wish you a peaceful weekend and also a happy Easter for those who celebrate. Thank you very much.